Privileged to be here. Yeah, on this snowy, for me, it's the morning, 11 o'clock, and it's snowing like mad, which in this West Coast city means everybody's terrified to step outside the door and nobody's going anywhere.
So, please,
אני פשוט אשתיק אותם.
Thank you.
And even the prime minister comes out of the province, comes out and says things like, stay at home. There's about 2 inches of snow. And he says, stay at home. I'm used to living in Ontario where you get 2 feet, where you couldn't get out the door unless you shoveled. So it's quite funny, actually. But it's beautiful when the city is all carpeted in white. Great big flakes, and my dogs go out in the yard and leap about. It seems to bring something out in them. Even my old dog, he leaps around in the snow, and so it's kind of different here. But it's a privilege to be here with you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. So I would say some words, and then we would like to hear you, of course. So. On the 7th of October, our world has changed. Every day, we've been exposed more and more to the horrors that took place that day and the implications of the events on our lives in the shadow of war. 136 people have not yet returned from Hamas captivity. And those who have returned share with us, the therapists, the horrors that have been endured. It is a hard time to be a therapist in Israel. It's a hard time to be in Israel. In an encounter with a man-made traumatic event, an encounter with the extreme human evil, a critical mass of good is needed to help to restore trust in the world. A critical mass of goodness and faith and spiritual figure to hold on to. And your presence today here with us is a significant part of this healing power. So thank you so.
Tal, in this situation, I was trying to think what I would say to you all. And in this situation, the truth is there are no words, really. Just that I feel for you and with you. And it feels like being here, we are standing right in front of, and I am not in Israel, but it feels like we are standing right in front with our nose up against the essence of trauma. Which is no solution, vulnerability. There appears to be no solution anyway. That's how trauma feels. It feels like suddenly you have no predictability, no certainty, no control, and that our human brains are designed to be freaked out by that. We're designed to be alarmed and freaked out and panicked. And so for us to manage to keep our balance in that kind of situation, I just think of it as a supreme feat of human courage and ingenuity, and almost like, in a way, accessing the best that human beings can be in the face of facing evil, facing what we call evil, so I feel the inadequacy of any words that I can say to you in this situation. I remember when I was a very idealistic, which I still tend to be, idealistic adolescent, and I remember saying to my father, My whole town was a military town. It was a naval town. Everyone in that town was in the Navy. Everyone had fought in World War II. I think about a quarter of the people had active PTSD when I look back on it now. I remember saying to my father, well, pacifism is the way to go, and, you send everyone love. He was a very mild, calm, loving man. And he said to me, no, Sue, there is evil in the world. And that is the truth. And maybe it will never happen to you, but if evil comes for you in your life, then you have a choice. And what I hope is you will stand up against it, no matter what it costs you, because the cost of not standing against it is more. So he told me that, and it's the kind of thing that you remember, because it gave me some sort of insight into the fact that at 15 I didn't know everything. Which was quite disturbing to me at the time, because I was a very opinionated little idiot, and some part of me really did think that I knew everything already. But yeah, it is. I cannot imagine what it is like for you and for you as healers, trying to go in and be with these people who have stared down horror in the way that they have. I cannot imagine. And I want to give incredible kudos and honor to my colleague Ilana Katz sitting there, who has created, instead of sitting there like I did and saying, well, what can I do? I can't really do anything. Instead of sitting there like that, she didn't do that. She, with her amazing New York, whatever you call it, energy, go for itness, she went and helped and created programs and helped to talk to the therapist and helped you guys and helped, people create programs. And so I want to give her lots of kudos for that. Thank you, Alana, and thank you for having the faith that I didn't quite have in that moment, which is that that we had something to offer from our EFT work, even in such a horrendous catastrophe as is happening now.
Well, Sue, you've taught us all well that one thing we can do is say, I'm here. And really the essence of the program that I imported, I love to take credit for all of it, but I imported something that I had volunteered a form of years ago. And it was a way of saying, we're here. You're not alone in Israel. We see you.
Yes.
And that we get from you, Sue. So
I hope so. I guess it's human to believe that at a certain point you wish you could do more. That somehow doesn't seem enough. Even though I'm an attachment theorist, attachment isn't everything. And somehow in this situation, it doesn't seem enough. But you, sweetie, you found a way to turn that into action. And I think Tal had a part in that too. And I'm sure other people on this call did. So I thank you for that, because our work is not about being famous or making money, right? Which I have been told recently is where psychotherapy is going and where everybody is going and where all people, I'm an idiot apparently, because I haven't sold EFT to a huge corporation, believe it or not. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And this gentleman said, well, why not? And I said, because I don't care about the money. And he looked at me like I was insane. And I felt rich at that moment, because I meant it, and it's true for me. And but that does seem to be the way psychotherapy is going. And I think we stand for something else. We stand for believing in our work and believing about what our work can bring human beings, and that we try to reflect the best and most hopeful and most optimistic part of human beings, and how human beings can be bonded in spite of all the chaos in the world. I was on my exercise bike yesterday afternoon, and I thought of you all. I actually sat there and thought, I have nothing to say to these courageous people. What on earth am I doing talking to them, right? But I listened to, there's a song by James Taylor called Shed a Little Light. And somehow it made me think of you all. It always moves me to tears somehow. He's talking about how we're all one family in the end, if we can just see that, if we can just believe in that. And he says, there is a feeling like the clenching of a fist. There is an aching in the center of the chest. There is a pathway through the darkness and the mist. And though the body sleeps, the heart will never rest. And he's talking about the fact that we have to believe that human beings can rise above all the evil we are seeing in the world, and can find a way to hold on to each other and face this vulnerability, this uncertainty together in a way that helps us create a better world. We have to find a way to believe that. And I think that is one of the things that comes under fire, literally, with huge trauma, especially the kind of trauma you guys are facing, where it's everywhere. I'm presuming it's how can you ever get away from it? It's in your whole society. Your whole society is being traumatized. I can't imagine, I was thinking about how would I find a safe place in that? Would I meditate? Would I turn to my friend and weep and have her hold me properly? Would I go out in the street and try to help some group that were doing something? I don't know how I'd find safety in that, but I think in all of it, I would have to hold on to some belief that as human beings, this does not define us, this struggle, this endless me and you, us and them, endless demonizing of each other, killing each other, hurting each other. And I think attachment does give us that on some level.
Yeah.
Bowlby basically said, his most basic insight walking around the streets of London when he was a young man, and the insight that created his first book. He was the first man to write a book on family therapy. It came out in 1944 and it was called 39 Juvenile Thieves. Or was it 44 Juvenile Thieves? One or the other. Anyway, he wrote a book and he basically said the message in that book is really the message of his whole work, which was underneath the violence and the apparent indifference and the callousness and the shutting down. Underneath all that you see in all these young adolescents on the streets of London is amazing pain and hurt and undealt with vulnerability. And there's hope in that. Of course, the trouble is you can't work with that when somebody's standing in front of you with a gun. That's a different situation. But nevertheless, there's still some hope in that we we can, you know, still believe in ourselves as human beings, and we can still believe that struggles like the ones you're going through are perhaps inevitable right now, but that we will find a way to go through them together. And hopefully one day we'll have something mysterious. Nobody else seems to find it mysterious but me these days. But we'll have something mysterious. We'll have something called civilization. And that maybe one day we'll have that. And I try to talk about that in the last chapter of my book, Hold Me, Love Sense. And I talk about the fact that this should be our goal as human beings. I don't think we've ever seen it personally. I think we've seen it for very tiny, brief periods. We've never really seen it. There was a very brief time in Spain. I went to Granada a couple of years ago. I adored it there. There was a very brief time in Spain in the 1400s where people came together, and Jewish people and Arab people and Christian people all came together in Granada, and they shared their knowledge. The Arabs brought mathematics and medicine, right? I mean, it's like they bought that from way, way, way away. The Christians bought other things. The Jewish people bought other things. You know, they created this amazing flowering, which was the beginning of the Renaissance, really. And they intermarried. And they joined each other in their ceremonies. And they started adopting each other's rituals. And you had this incredible moment of what I think of as civilization. And then, of course, Isabella of Spain, who was a religious fanatic, came in and decided that everybody except the Christians needed killing. So that was that, right? But I think what I'm talking about is holding out hope for us as human beings, and holding out hope for us that we can find a way through these terrible, dark moments and still somehow believe that we can make it through. And I think if you're going to deal with trauma, you know, I was thinking what I would need. When I came to your country, I met some of your wonderful, wonderful grad students. I was particularly fascinated by the women. I'm obsessed with warrior women. I read books about warrior women. I read books in history about warrior women, okay? I just read a book called Hidden Warriors, which is about how the fact that women have been in every war since the beginning of time, men just deny that they've been there, and how important they've been, and that, you know, women can be soft and loving, but they can also face terrible odds, and they're brave and they're calm, and they're all these things that sometimes they're not seen as. So, you know, this idea of warrior women fascinates me. I remember watching these two young grad students across the room, and I thought, what are they talking about? If it was my country, they'd be talking about men, right? Or you know, how impossible men were. So I thought, I'm going to go and see what they're talking about. I walked across. They were talking about which rifle was the most effective in combat. Okay. And you may call me a bit perverse, but I loved that. And I've never forgotten it. I loved it because it was about women being able to fight, maybe in different ways than men sometimes. Fight for what they believe in, fight for who we can be as human beings, stand up against evil and chaos, and fight in a way. Alana's way of fighting has been to bring you these incredible programs. I'm not sure I have ways of fighting except being with you here and telling you that your situation appalls me and moves me and brings up sorrow and grief in me. Working with trauma, I think I've learned in the last 2 years particularly that the main thing under trauma isn't fear. The main core emotion under trauma is deep grief, sadness, a longing for what has been lost. And if it's a terror of uncertainty, not having any control at all. But mostly when trauma survivors go into their deepest emotions, you meet grief, walls and walls and walls of grief. And the only way through that is to be with them while they cry. At least that is the only way I've ever known. I guess the other way is to turn, and your culture is very good at this, much better than my culture right now, I think. Turn to what we've been talking about, which is an existential stance, a belief in something bigger, if you want to call it God, a belief in a religious view of the world. I think that can also give us safe haven, secure base. But I'm talking a lot. I don't even really know what you would like from me today. I'm just talking about what came up for me when I thought about coming to talk to you. So it's me rabbiting on the way Sue Johnson usually does. So maybe you need to tell me what you would like me to talk about.
That's great. Well, we will. And it's great to hear your stories, and that's endless and always interesting. And thank you for your words. That is really very meaningful for all of us. And I did wanted to tell you a little bit more about things that happened here and a specific request from you. So as you can see now, we have 80 people in this Zoom, but many people asked me to record this. We have a community of about 250 EFTers that go to stay engaged and active in our WhatsApp group. And that's a great source of support and belonging. And I really wanted to also use this opportunity to say thank you for all of you. This is a really meaningful community to me. And shortly after the breakout of the war, Ofra, Kula, and I teamed up and returned back to hold on to the EFT as a professional home, and that gives us security. And so what we've learned from you and from Ilana and George that came here is that the live sessions, that it is possible in a short time, in a focused short time, to go into the life of couple and help them in a meaningful way. That gave us the strength to organize a focused couple intervention for survivors. And Ofra, Lina, Vivi, Daphna, and 15 other more experienced and dedicated therapists that are here with us today are currently implementing interventions throughout the country within the public service. And Osnat is also leading an intervention in another public clinic. And there are many therapists here, each of whom in his workspace carries an important part in this treatment and brings the principles of attachment, systematic therapy, emotionally focused treatment to the field. And this is your vision that thanks to you, and really thanks to Ilana and George that brought the EFT here to us. So thank you for that.
You're most welcome. That's it. It's good for my heart to know that you found this useful in this terrible time.
Yeah, it was. And Israel is a small community, really, and like everyone has, as you already said yourself, everyone has someone who's relative to someone who was exposed to the horrors, or someone that is in the army. And we as caregivers are on the front of this, the home front of this war, while we ourselves are dealing also with being in this situation. Right. So that's the part I was wanting to thank Ilana for the We to We project, which is we're really grateful for that. In these days, I think we mainly deal with the return of soldiers back home. They come back, they go out again. I saw one of my patients in a 24 hours break he had. Their wives stay at home with all the burden and the anxiety. So for most of us, this is a new field. And there are many things that I would like to hear and learn from you, Sue, but if I have to stay focused, I think the main thing we would be happy to hear is about from your experience working with soldiers.
Mostly when I've worked with trauma on an individual basis, I've worked with incest survivors, people who've been very badly abused in childhood and often have had no attachment at all, which is, for me, it's amazing that they've survived, but they have somehow, okay? Sometimes by doing very desperate things, but they've survived. So mostly I've worked with incest survivors, with soldiers, with combat vets, and then, of course, with couples. I've worked with traumatized couples. What hit me when you talked about the traumatized couples was our Healing Hearts program at the big hospital in the capital city of Canada, in Ottawa, which was a program that we've created, and it's being researched right now with a huge research grant, which there's no huge research grants in Canada, okay? They don't exist. So this was some sort of miracle, all right? Especially to go to a psychologist. Are you joking? Right? But anyway, it did. And it's about when one person has a very severe heart attack. You know, the couple I worked with, the man had a new heart in his chest. He'd had a heart replacement. And it's very clear to the medical faculty that the couple cannot deal with this together. That somehow there isn't any, the medical faculty, what would they call it? Comfort or cooperation. You know, I'd call it attachment between the couple, and that we created a program for that. And I had much the same feeling as you. I was, they first of all, they said, we're only going to give you 5 sessions with them. And I said, no, that doesn't work, right? And I got them up to, I can't even remember what we did now. I think I got them up to something like 15. But, you know, and then I thought, well, it's still not going to work, you know, because of all the other things that's going on in this person's life, you know. But it did work, and it does work. And the power of attachment, if you can, what I have come to believe is if you can mobilize the power of safe attachment in a couple, there is no question. I mean, the research says it, but you know, it's another thing to see it clinically on a regular basis, right? And to be able to predictively create it. There is no power like the power of secure attachment in a couple to create resilience in both people. There is no power, there is no drug, there is no meditation, there is nothing like the power of secure attachment to create resilience in individual people. And that's just true. You know, it's not just in the psychological research for me anymore. It happens before my eyes all the time. And yes, we do know how to do that. Not that it's easy. I think in particular, the challenge for me with those couples was often seeing and recognizing the pain of the person who was not being directly traumatized. The wife who stays at home, you know, and she doesn't want to talk about her pain because after all, she gets to stay at home. Hasn't got a rifle in her hand, hiding behind a rock, right? And so why should we listen to her? That she can't go to sleep at night, and she ends up waking up in a sweat, knowing that her husband has been killed, right? That is something that I had to learn to really honor and look for and hold and teach the couple to hold. because, you know, the person who isn't the direct victim often doesn't feel entitled to that kind of care. And the person who's dealing with trauma up to their eyeballs, you know, you don't want them to feel overwhelmed by that either, right? So that one was a real issue for us, and I think we learned to work with it, you know, and we helped the couple see how they would trigger each other and actually unwittingly bring the trauma into their dance, when what they needed was to create a different kind of dance, right? That's working with couples. When you're working with individuals, you're using all the same skills. You know, from 2 years of doing EFIT, which turns me on like I can't believe, okay? It turns me on, okay? It just excites me. And after a couple of years of really, really focusing just on EFIT and working with these survivors, I feel like I've worked with trauma all my life as a therapist, individually as well as with couples, but in the last 2 years, I feel like I have refined how I see trauma and how I deal with it. What have I learned from my soldiers in particular? Well, we learn the things that are hardest for us in our personalities, I think. One of the things I've learned from my soldiers is to wait. Yeah, that's not my thing. Okay, I am, Alana might tell you, or maybe she doesn't see this part of me, I don't know. I'm like, somebody said to me in a meeting the other day, you know, Sue, this can't happen overnight. Rome wasn't built in a day. I said, you don't understand. I'm not interested in Rome being built in a day. I want it built by lunchtime. Okay. And I want this to happen now, you know, and that's my whole take on the world, which was, I don't know, a bit ridiculous. But that is me. And so I have learned from these soldiers that I have to keep doing safety building, keep doing affirmation and reflection, and doing reflection again and again, because their amygdala is in freak out. And why should an amygdala in freak out listen to me, a therapist, talking in a room? No reason on earth. So I have to be more persistent and wait for this person to even begin to listen, you know, to begin to be able to take in, you know, I may be trying to make a coherent story of what for them is chaos, right? Their everyday life is chaos. How they got where they are is chaos. You know, why they joined the army is chaos. You know, how they got into this position in this army group is chaos. You know, how this trauma that just happened to them. It shouldn't have happened to them. You know, they had everything under control. It was, you know, in this chaos, the therapist tries to put it all together in a story that has logic and order. Logic and order. Order. You order the unorderable. You order the chaos. You find the pattern in the chaos and you order it, which is the same as we do with distressed couples. They say, this is just me. This is who I am. This is who he is. We're, you know, no, and these are what relationship. No. Let's look at the dance between you. Let's look at how you create this, right? So it's the same idea, but you often have to, well, bottom line is, and I shouldn't say this because it's not what you guys probably want, you have to work harder. You know, that's the truth. You know, you have to, somebody says, you know, it was my fault. You know, if I missed the shot, okay? I missed the shot. or if I hadn't missed the shot, you know, my 2 friends wouldn't have died. Do you understand? I missed the shot. And you say, yes, I understand. I understand that this is, and notice I've already dropped my voice and gone low and slow. And this is what terrifies and tortures you, and this is what you think of when you wake up at night. If only you hadn't missed the shot, yes. And somehow it means something dreadful about you that you missed the shot, yes. Yes. And what happened that morning was, you know, and you put it together, right, in a way that isn't inevitably leading to the conclusion that this person is, you know, a terrible person and a bad soldier and a failure and what did my last guy, he was Israeli actually, he told me I'm a traitor. I'm a traitor because I failed the ultimate test, right? And that means that I'm a traitor. And if I'm a traitor, then I don't deserve any love. I don't deserve any care. I don't deserve any help. I should just go and live on a mountain with my 2 dogs and read existential philosophy, right? And he was quite interesting because he kept saying to me things like, have you read Heidegger? And thank goodness I was able to say, yes, I have read Heidegger. I did say, I can't remember a word of it now, but I said, yes, I have read Heidegger. Now let's go back to what you said. Like what he was really telling me was, I want to stay in my head. I want to stay in my head. You're getting in the way of me staying in my head. And the other thing he told me, which I think we have a gift in EFT. This man said to me, you're just going to do what all therapists do. You're going to try and persuade me that I'm not a traitor and that I'm not a bad soldier and that life isn't so bad and that I can cope with this. And you're just kind of trying to persuade me of that. And you're all useless. And, you know, you're not going to try and persuade me because, you know, you've never stood and looked down the barrel of a rifle. And he's right. He's right. You know, you're not going to persuade me. And thank goodness the EFT frame on that is, of course I'm not going to try and persuade you. I'm going to show you how it makes perfect, complete emotional and logical sense that you see it that way and you put it together that way. This man basically said, I'm impossible and I'm invisible and nobody could see me anyway. And instead of saying, no, 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 right? I say, yes, I understand. And why would you not believe that? Because nobody did see you, did they? Nobody saw you. All the time you were growing up, you were alone. Nobody saw you. So, you know, you validate their reality and you, at the same time, you frame it and you order it and you have to stay there for a while. And you have to repeat yourself. That's true in all good EFT, but with trauma, you have to repeat yourself. I always think of it as singing to somebody's amygdala. You know, if I'm freaked out, I'm going through some rather upsetting medical stuff right now. And I know that when I go and sit in that doctor's office, I'm freaked out before I walk in there. Okay, I'm already freaked out. Every single thing in my brain is zoning. So I only hear negative things. I just hear the negative things. And I know that there's no point in, when we've done with the interview, there's no point in my husband turning and telling me all the positive things because I can't hear them. Okay. And, you know, I have to slow down a bit and breathe and sort of wait a little to calm down. And it's almost like the first time I run it through that he heard this positive thing, I didn't even hear it. My amygdala goes, no, you're in danger, time to freak out, freak out. And the second time he says it, my amygdala says, I'm not interested. No, that's not the truth. The third time, my amygdala says, really? I don't believe you. Fourth time, my amygdala says, did she say that? Fifth time, I cry. Because I hear something new that me and my terror didn't hear, right? So you have to sort of give people time you have to give the amygdala time to actually start to hear the coherence and the order and the compassion in your message, especially if we're dealing with something as vivid as most soldiers' flashbacks are. You know, I know that we talk about flashbacks as being, you know, just part of PTSD and they happen to everybody, and it's true, everyone gets triggered. But I must say, I think of all the people I've worked with over the years, and it's soldiers and military folks who have the most vivid flashbacks. It's like they're in the middle of the movie. There isn't even one tiny little piece of them that is standing outside and saying this is a movie. They're completely caught in the movie, which is completely debilitating because you don't know when this movie is going to switch on. You don't know when it's coming for you, right? So I've learned things about pacing from my trauma guys. I've learned things, they're not all guys either. There's women in the military now. I've learned women warriors. Right? I've learned things about pacing. I've learned things about repetition. I've learned things about that if you want to help someone begin to see pattern and order in something where they are completely overwhelmed, you have to wait. You can't force that. You have to continually show them, you know, the order in what they're experiencing. And images and metaphors are terribly powerful, terribly powerful. You know, working with the lady in the primer that we just wrote on trauma that came out a couple of years ago, you know, it struck me very much that even in the beginning, where she wouldn't really tell me anything about anything, she just told me sort of content details, and none of them made sense. And right, it's like for the first 10 sessions, she was basically testing me. I think she wouldn't tell me anything except for the image that she was out in the sea trying to save her sisters from drowning, her two sisters. So she would go to one and hold that one up, then she'd go to the other one and hold that one up, and then she'd do this until she's totally exhausted. Right, well, that is what she did all her childhood. She tried to prevent her father raping her two sisters, which of course she couldn't do because she was only 8 years old. But that was the way I think she stayed sane, right, when she was with this amazingly violent, completely out of control sexually man who terrified everybody in the family, including the mum, who wouldn't do anything, would just go catatonic when these things started to happen. You know, she gave me that image, and so I would go back to that image again and again. And most of your trauma survivors will give you a core image which captures their dilemma, their lack of choice, but also their choice, which, you know, she did keep swimming around trying to save her sisters, right? The irony is her sisters, according to them, don't remember any of this. They have other problems. They've been depressed and eating disorder, but according to them, they don't remember any of this trauma. It's her who's been carrying the PTSD for, well, she's now 55, so she's been carrying it for her whole life. So I think we're really talking about move one of the tango here, and how you have to hang out there, and you have to expect that these folks aren't going to trust you with their softer softer feelings. Why should they? You know, why should a man who's been dodging bullets for a month come and talk to me, really? You know, how can I tell him that I have something to offer him? Do I even know that I have something to offer him? I mean, that's the humbling thing here. You know, as an EFT therapist, I never go in thinking, oh, you know, I've got the answer here. This isn't this kind of therapy. This is a collaborative therapy where you go in and you say, let me stand with you in the most impossible situations where our human frailty is obvious, and where if I'm going to stand with you in that, I have to be willing to feel that frailty, at least while we're together, and at least while you're talking to me, and at least for a while, you know, I might not feel it the same way as you, but I have to be willing to feel that frailty. And I think that is one of the things that worried me about thinking of you all and made me feel very good about Alana's program, that of course you need support. Of course you do. Of course you do. Of course you do. And how foolish that I didn't, that, you know, that it didn't occur to me, you know, what occurred to Alana, right? That somehow we should structure support for you, because, you know, if you're going to attune to these people and walk into their pain, you're going to feel it. And I think that's one reason sometimes why EFT will never be the CBT of psychotherapy. Most therapists would rather not feel that. I think if you're an Israeli at this point in history, it's probably not an option. You know that life is uncertain, and that, you know, any moment something dreadful can happen. You know that on a different level than I do in my nice little, calm, relatively safe Canadian house where you don't even bother to open the paper because Canadian politics is like watching paint dry. You know, it's so boring. It's just nothing's basically happening, right? And then you realize, hey, don't knock that, Sue. If you were in Israel right now, you'd be celebrating the fact that nothing much happens in Canada. You know, you're in my local paper yesterday, right across the front, the big news was that there was a bear trapped up a tree, you know. You think, oh, come on, like, is this it? Yeah, this is it. This is Victoria. Okay, there's a bear up a tree, and everyone gets all upset. Some people want to shoot the bear, some people don't want to shoot the bear. You know, they ended up anesthetizing the bear and, you know, taking it somewhere or whatever. But the other thing about working with trauma survivors, particularly battle survivors, that I've learned is that you have to be more deliberate about everything and repeat everything. And that includes move 2 of the tango, which is, you know, assembling somebody's emotion. And I've learned from these folks that I must never assume that I know what the core emotion will be. I must never assume that, because I don't know. And sometimes it's a mixture, like with my soldier that I was talking to you about just now. It's a mixture of shame and terrible, terrible, terrible grief and sorrow. And underneath the sorrow, of course, there's longing. That's the great thing that Bowlby taught us, really. There's always the longing. It's part of being human. You can't stop that. There's longing. You know, that's who we are. This longing to be seen, to be held, to feel important to somebody. There's longing. And, you know, the pain of never having that longing met, right? But, you know, I think in the past, I naively assumed that when I sort of uncovered, you know, the ways that people deal with their difficult emotions, I would always find some variation of fear. And now I sort of somehow that doesn't satisfy me very much. And I wait And I usually find some variation on shame and grief, terrible grief, and unmet longing underneath the grief that they can never acknowledge. Because if they acknowledge the longing, the grief comes barreling out of the past, and it often is in the past. It's not always in the battle that happened 2 weeks ago or 6 months ago. It's often exacerbated by all the things that happened in the past. You know, with this man in particular, he came from a military family, and all of the men in his family, he was a very sensitive, incredibly bright, sensitive young boy. And all the men in his military family told him, you won't just be a soldier, you'll be a national hero. You'll save. And I actually asked some of my male Jewish friends, I said, talk to me about this, please. Help me understand this culture more. So I took a risk and said, you weren't just supposed to be a soldier, you were supposed to be the national hero, right? He said, yes. I said, you were supposed to save your people, weren't you? He said, yes. I said, right. You were supposed to save your people from everything. You were supposed to stop the Romans tearing down the temple, right? And that was a bit risky, especially for me as a non-Jewish person. It's a bit presumptuous. But he said, yes. I said, right. So then, you know, on those terms, you're a traitor. Yeah. You're a traitor. And he said, yes. And then he wept. You know, and for him to weep was, well, it's quite a step from, have you read Heidegger? You know, I vaguely remember I didn't like Heidegger, but I can't remember anything else that he said. But anyway, you know, I did read all those existential dudes at one point when I was looking for something meaningful. But you have to go into finding the trigger. There's a specific trigger. And sometimes people don't want to look at it. It's easier to say, I'm angry, than to say, I don't know. I don't know why I exploded at the bus stop, okay? I don't know. I don't know what happened to me. And then, of course, as a therapist, you say, can we slow down? Let's stay with that. Let's stay with what happened at the bus stop, yeah? Right. What happened at the bus stop? You know, it was raining. And my colleague, Leanne Campbell, taught me to stay closer to the details of the situation. I learned this from watching her, okay? It was raining. Yeah, it was cold. It was cold on your skin, and you felt slightly sick. That's what you said. And you go into the trigger, and you go into what happens when they actually allow themselves to actually really touch this trigger live. You know, and they'll say something like, I feel shaky. And then they'll change the subject. Right? And that's all right, because you can bring it up again and again. And that they're telling you that's all I can tolerate. And then you talk about what that means. And it means that I'm pathetic. It means that I'm not who I should be. It means that I'm weak. It means what? That I'm going to let everyone down. It means that I'm going to betray my country. Oh my goodness me. Like, this thing's just got out of hand so fast. Right? And what does that mean? That means you shut it down. Shut it down. Do whatever you have to do to shut it down. Do more push-ups. Do more push-ups at the gym. Right? Do more exercises. Go out on the practice, you know, your aim and your fire with your gun, you know, just be a better soldier. This is what you just shut it down because you don't know what else to do with it, right? So you start to go in there and walk around in it with somebody, not just labeling it, but sort of looking at the music, the symphony as it evolves the theme in the music, you know, which is this trigger and then this feeling in the body. And then suddenly all these thoughts are right there, right, about what this means. And it means absolutely terrible, catastrophic things about you, the world, everything you can imagine that is uncertain and bad and catastrophic. And then you don't have many things to do with it. What do we do with that? We freak out more. We get enraged and irritable and unreliable and push people away, or we shut down. And especially for soldiers, the first one isn't really an option. So the shutdown is the core issue. And how do they do that? What do they do? What do they do? You know, how exactly do they shut down? Well, this gentleman would go into his head and start talking about existential philosophy and coming up with existential formulas for, you know, how you're supposed to live your life, which were like so far away from his lived experience that, you know, when he first started doing it, it's complicated because soldiers are coming back and forth. Yes. So they're being constantly re-traumatized. Rebecca, is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Right. So then the trauma can change and the trigger can change.
It's, you know, and just going into those soft feelings could be actually dangerous now, because they might just be going up to a war up north soon. Like it's so volatile right now.
I understand. So the only way I would know how to deal with that is to acknowledge it, to say, you know, I understand that you don't want to touch these softer feelings, right? That it's hard for us to talk about this because you're aware that you've got to put them away, right? When you put your boots on tomorrow morning, you've got to put them away because you're going back into danger when you're going to need to have all your soft feelings under control. Yeah, right. Yeah. To be able to talk about that and talk about that process and how they do it. You know, the bottom line is, do they have anything positive to do with that, right? And what you hope, because we're attachment theorists, is that there's a move 3 you can do where you can get them to at least touch some of those softer feelings and allow them and accept them and share them with someone they love so that they get support. That's what you hope. The real difficulty is when you have a guy who's being continually traumatized, like in our case, it was special forces, okay? So they would be called in the middle of the night and told you're flying to something, you know, and we're not even going to tell you what you're doing there, right? And then they'd come back and then a week later they could be called again. So that's a sort of similar situation, right? And you could certainly understand that they needed to be able to shut down, right, their feelings. The point is, nobody can live there all the time. And that's the truth, right? And if you try to live there every minute, at some point you're going to split wide open, right? And military discipline can be military discipline, but at some point you're going to split wide open. So what you hope is that they can touch that vulnerability, maybe in a more controlled way than you would do with a civilian who was coming to you for therapy every week and wasn't being re-traumatized, and that they would then be able to turn to someone in their life and get support, right? A wife, a father, a brother, a colleague, you know, a battle brother, you know, somebody. If they cannot do that, which is the ultimate challenge, what you do is you do what we so often do in EFIT, which is that you evoke an internalized attachment figure, perhaps from the past, right? Like I've had terribly traumatized women who've lived on reservations, who've been continually traumatized again and again and again over years. evoke an image of their grandmother, who was the only safe house that they could ever go to. And they weren't allowed to go to her very often, but they could go to this house, and they remember this house. They remember what it looked like. They remember her voice. They remember how she would hold them. They remember what she would say. Of course they do, because their amygdala codes it as incredibly important, right? It's the only escape from this. And you help this person express as much of their vulnerability as they can and as is feasible for them to this internalized attachment figure. And then you create a dialogue with the internalized attachment figure, right? Which can be amazingly powerful. But you're right, I hear you, that if somebody is going back into the line of fire all the time, you have to be careful about how you access their vulnerability, because they need to be able to put it away. Yeah, they do need to be able to put it away, right? And talking to them about that process would usually be the EFT way. What do you do with it, Rebecca? What do you do with it?
I haven't worked yet with soldiers who have come back and forth, like they're still there. But I'm wondering, because it's a very hard place. And when you're dealing with the wives, how much do they share? How much don't they share? The worry of the wives, the worry of, if they touch that vulnerability and then they start talking about it and then they end up going back to battlefield and what everybody's going through. When you're working with couples, it's that much more complicated.
Okay. So now you've brought in another piece, which is you're working with couples. I was assuming you're working with individuals, right? Yeah, it can be, especially if the couple are distressed. However, if the wives can step up, if the wives see their partner's vulnerability, my experience is that for most people, especially in very difficult situations, that evokes compassion if compassion is on offer at all. And if the wives can step up, even a little bit, and offer connection, which has a real pull to it. When your partner, who you've experienced as perhaps indifferent and able to shut you out anytime they feel like it, right? When that partner actually starts to show you their softer side, there's an amazing pull there, because then you feel, for you, it tells you that you're important to this person, that they're risking to be with you, that you have something that they need. There's a huge attachment, natural pull there to be able to hear that. I mean, not saying that it takes all the stuff away that you've been through, the distress of years. It doesn't. But, it's a real door opening for lots of people, and if the wife, for example, can turn and start to reassure or comfort or affirm in some of the ways the therapist does, then that can be amazingly powerful. And men take that into battle. What do men take into battle? They take what their father said to them when they joined the army. They take what their mother told them when they were young. They take what their colleague told them in basic training when they nearly gave up. They take their basic belief in who they are and what they think they can do in the world, and whether they think they can make a difference. That's what they take with them. And, the tricky part is that those things are all up for grabs when you're under fire, and when, you're not sure what's going to happen next. Suddenly all those things are up for grabs. If you have a really good hold on them, and if your wife a week earlier, you remember her face going soft and her turning and saying this to you, saying, "You're my man, and we fight, and I get angry, but you're my man, and you're a good man, and you're a good soldier." and I want you to come home to me. If you remember that, I really believe that that has huge impact on your body, huge impact on your mental processes, huge impact on your ability to turn and face whatever you're looking at, right? It's this thing about attachment creating resilience, belonging leading to becoming isn't an abstract research idea or an ideological point. It's a basic reality. I mean, the brain scan study we did taught us that. That brain scan study blew me away. As far as I was concerned, it should have been on the front of the New York Times. Okay, it wasn't. Nobody put anything about it anywhere. It's like, don't you understand? In 20 sessions, we've taken a completely distressed couple where they saw each other as the enemy, and we've created these events that turn it into the fact that when this partner holds this person's hand and they feel threatened like hell, that their brain stays calm and they don't experience threat the same way. Hey, this is a brain scan study on therapy. Nobody took any notice at all. It's like it never happened. It was one of those things that made you want to go out on the street and pound the pavement. You just couldn't believe, but nobody paid any attention. But it's a real thing. It's a real thing. And it's why some people, those of us who have been incredibly fortunate in our lives, mostly, can go into terrible trauma situations and can find their balance in them and can amazingly not come out unscathed, because I don't think that's human, but can come out still with their balance intact. I think my father was one of those. Okay, he was one of those, and I don't understand how he got that, where he got that from, or he was a very uneducated man, but certainly he was in traumatic situations in World War II, and he had this calm about him that I experienced in the pub when every Friday night everyone got drunk, all the PTSD folks started to get triggered and the pub turned into complete chaos. My father would walk out from behind the bar and say, "Now, guys." And half of them would calm down. And if there was somebody who really wouldn't calm down, my father would walk up to him sort of almost with caring, put his hand on his shoulder and say, and do it personally. Now, Jock, I want you to stop shouting. Jock, can you hear me? I want you to stop shouting. And if Jock really couldn't do it, my father would say, yes. He'd hold him gently by the shoulder and knock him out. Okay, and Jock would fall down and the other men would catch him. And then my father would take him in the back room and I'd hear through the door, because I'd listen, of course, I couldn't hear. I'd hear through the door, da 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 da. This is my father talking to this man. Okay? And I think, what's he doing? He's talking to his amygdala. That's what he's doing. Now, where did my father get this calm, this incredible calm? I don't know. From his mother. I don't know. He's one of 8 kids. They lived in 2 rooms, okay, out in the country. They hardly ever had enough to eat, right? Where did he get it? He must have got it from an attachment figure. That's the only thing I can figure. He wasn't a religious man, right? I have a colleague who's a very religious man, and I said to him he works with trauma survivors, lots of vets, and I said to him the other day, I wish I had your cast iron faith. I wish I had it. I I can't imagine how it helps you in your life. And he said, yes. You know, and then he basically said something that showed his faith, which was something like, you know, everything's going to work out because God's in control. And I'm thinking, how can I find this thing that he's got, right? How can I put my finger on it? You know, it's like, oh my God, life would be so much easier, right? So some people have a religious faith that does this for them. Some people have a philosophy that comes close anyway, right? But most people, it ends up being an image of an attachment figure. And what I've learned is that image can be quite brief. It's not necessarily someone who's lived with you, or it can be quite brief, but you can still go in and use it as a source of resilience. You know, if you had a soldier whose father was a soldier, you know, and you get the feeling that the father and the son had a compassionate relationship. You know, maybe at one point in move 3, you have the soldier close his eyes and tell his father how he was feeling bad about the last gunfight, and listen to what his father would tell him, right? I hope somebody's going to get that in my house. Anyway, it's...
So, you are being so generous to us with your time, and I don't want to exhaust you too much.
Well, I appreciate that. It's been quite fascinating. You're dealing with such challenging... I mean, you're in the trauma cauldron at the same time as trying to help people. That's what strikes me most. You have to do affect regulation at the same time as helping these folks with their affect regulation. We haven't been talking about your resilience and where you get your resilience from. I hope this model is a source of resilience for you. I hope it is. But I'm honored that I can help. And if I can help in any other ways, please let me know. I hope that some of the things I've said have been useful or inspiring, or, you know, we're writing a book on trauma, specifically on trauma, and quite a bit of it is going to be with vets, actually. But it's all on individual therapy, not on couples, right? But we do love to complicate things, don't we? You know, we go into active war zones, then we add couples, then we add people who were traumatized as children anyway, and then we add, you know, oh, they're going to be traumatized again next week, and then we add, I mean, you guys are really... You're
very, very brave. I think it's an incredibly brave community.
Yes, you better believe.
Who really are also supporting each other so beautifully. You know, you have a lot to be proud of, Sue, in this Israel EFT community.
I'm hearing that. I am proud of them. I'm proud of them. And I'm proud of you, Alana, and the things you did. And the fact that you didn't sit like me and say, well, I don't know what I can do. There's nothing I can do. And like, you didn't. You just said, you got up off your butt and did stuff, right? It's like, good for you. I give you kudos, right?
Thank you. And I had a great team to help. It was I had the thought, but I also got lots of support to move it forward. And I think anything that also helps the community find strength within, I hope feels good as well. So
yes.
And I just have to say that for Tal, who literally got the news that she became a trainer candidate on October 9th, 2 days after this massacre and the war broke out, I don't know anyone who's become a trainer candidate in that moment and who's risen to the occasion so incredibly. So I just really also want to deeply acknowledge that.
Right. Well done, Tal. Well done. Okay, guys, it's been very good to talk to you. I wish there was more that I could do. Please let me know if you have questions that you desperately wanted to ask, you never got the chance. Just send me them by email, send them through Tal or Alana, okay, and I'll do my best.
Thank
But
you, everyone. We all want to send you strength and our love and prayers to your struggle. And thank you for sharing with us all these stories. And that's the big inspiring stories that goes with us. Thanks.
you're most welcome. It's been good to see you. Please take care of you guys. Please take care. Please try to stay safe. Maybe I shouldn't even say that, but please stay safe, and you know, you'll find a way through. You'll find a way through. You guys always do. That's who you are, guys. That's the strength of your culture and your religion and the one of the beauties of your people, that, you know, you've had in the darkness, you always find a way through. So if EFT can be part of that, then we're honored. Okay, nice to talk to you all. Take care now.
Thank you so much, Sue.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So you can stay with us, right? Don't go. Just Sue is going.
אפשר בעברית.
That's it. תדברו בעברית.
אילנה הכירה.
רוצים שאני אעזוב ואתם צריכים...
לא, למה שתעזבי?
לא.
למה?
אז
בבית כאן, אילנה.
כך מאוחר לכם, אני דואגת קצת, אבל אני אגיד לכם, יש לי משהו, יש לי עוד 10 דקות, ועכשיו אני אעזוב, זה לא יהיה בקשר למה שמישהו יגיד או משהו כזה. So,
אילנה, כל עוד זה בעברית, הכל בסדר.
טוב, תדברו בעברית, מה שאני מבינה, אני מבינה.
לא, אבל אנחנו רוצים לשמוע אותך.
אז אני עובדת על העברית שלי.
ממש, אילנה, זה מצוינת העברית.
זה שומר על הקשר איתכם, אם אני מדברת עברית יום יום, אפילו לכמה דקות.
אבל את מדברת,
ממש השתנתה לך העברית.
זה גם האולפן וגם הדואלינגו שאת...
הדואלינגו?
וואו, אילנה.
איזה יופי.
זה ממש משמח לשמוע אותך, אילנה.
תודה, ואני רוצה לשמוע לכם. אתם עובדים משהו, זה משהו, וטל, כל הכבוד מה שעשית עם הספר הזה. כל הכבוד.
אילנה, הלייב הבא בעברית.
לייב הקודם היה בעברית.
טוב.
וואו.
טוב. אז אני רציתי גם קצת לנצל את הזמן הזה to update about the changes in ISEF and about maybe it's too late, I don't know, we can find another time. Sue offered, we asked for 45 minutes, so it would be, can you please join us for, and then she was just
generous,
being very generous, and I was uncomfortable. Should I stop her? Is that polite to stop her, or is it that not polite to not stop her? But
אי אפשר לדעת, נכון? אי אפשר. אלו ואלו גם וגם, כן.
אלו ואלו וגם וגם. עכשיו רק תגידי מה עמלות, אילנה, ואני אשנה כבר בלילה.
מה עמלות, כן.
נראה לי שאתה...
עכשיו היה עצפה, נכון?
נראה לי שאת העדכונים על השינויים נעשה בזמן אחר.